The human sat alone on a wooden bench at the edge of the alien marketplace. His name was Daniel, a man who had seen many worlds but never quite felt at home in any of them. The market around him buzzed with strange colors, voices, and smells. Alien merchants shouted in languages he barely understood, selling fruits that glowed, weapons that hummed, and fabrics that shimmered like starlight. Daniel was tired. He only wanted a quiet meal and maybe a moment of peace before moving on to the next planet. But peace never lasts long in the galaxy. Out of the noise and movement, a young alien girl stepped in front of him. She was small but carried herself with confidence. Her skin shimmered faintly under the twin suns, and her golden eyes locked onto him like a hunter spotting prey. Daniel looked up, surprised, thinking she had mistaken him for someone else. Then she spoke. "Do you want a mate, human?" Daniel froze. He blinked once, certain he had misheard her. He looked around to see if anyone else was listening, but the crowd was too busy. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What did you just say?" The girl didn't laugh. She didn't smile. Her voice was calm, almost serious. "Do you want a mate, human? My mother can bake pies and slay armies. Take her as your bride." Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. He thought this had to be a joke, some strange alien humor. But her face was not the face of a joker. Her golden eyes were steady, her tone clear, as if she were offering the most normal thing in the world. He pushed his plate of food away and studied her more carefully. She could not be more than 16 human years in appearance, though with aliens you never knew their true age. She wore plain clothes, but her presence was sharp, like she carried a hidden blade. Daniel laughed nervously, trying to shake off the strange moment. "Kid, you must be confused. I think you have the wrong human." But the girl stepped closer. Her voice dropped lower, more urgent. "No, I chose the right one. My mother does not need just anyone. She needs someone different. She needs someone human." A cold shiver ran down Daniel's back. The way she said human felt heavy, like it carried meaning far beyond species. He wanted to stand up and walk away, but something in her voice pinned him to his seat. He tried again, his voice softer now. "Why me?" The girl tilted her head as if she were studying him in return. "Because you are not afraid. I watched you when the merchant threatened you over the price of bread. You did not draw a blade, but you did not back down. You stood like a wall. That is the kind of strength my mother needs." Daniel's memory flashed back to the argument an hour ago. A merchant had tried to cheat him, and though Daniel didn't fight, he refused to move until the man gave him a fair price. To him it was nothing, but to this girl it had been proof of something larger. Still, this made no sense. A mate, her mother, bake pies and slay armies. It sounded like a child's story. Daniel stood up at last, his voice firm. "Listen, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not looking for a bride. And certainly not from some stranger's mother." The girl didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled faintly for the first time. "You will change your mind when you meet her." Daniel froze again. Meet her. Before he could speak, the girl turned and began walking through the crowd. She didn't look back, but her voice carried clearly over the noise of the market. "Follow me, human. If you walk away now, you will regret it forever." His chest tightened. Every instinct told him to leave, to forget this strange encounter and board the next transport out of the system. But something stronger pulled at him. Curiosity, suspense, the way she had spoken, as if she already knew his future. Daniel clenched his fists, then sighed. Against his better judgment, he followed. The market noise faded behind them as the girl led him into narrow alleys, twisting paths between tall stone buildings marked with alien carvings. The air grew cooler, the light dimmer, until finally they stopped at the edge of a courtyard. The girl turned slowly, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the shadow. "She is waiting," she whispered. Daniel swallowed hard. He didn't even know who she was. But he felt the weight of the moment pressing on him. His life, quiet and drifting until now, was about to change forever. And then he heard footsteps, heavy, strong, steady. Someone was coming. Asterisk. Daniel's boots scraped against the uneven stone as he followed the strange alien girl deeper into the maze of narrow streets. The noise of the market faded until only distant echoes reached his ears. Shadows grew longer, and the cool air smelled faintly of smoke and metal. His heart pounded, but he kept walking, almost against his own will. He told himself he could leave at any moment. He didn't have to play along with this nonsense. But each time he thought about turning back, his curiosity grew heavier. Who was this girl's mother? Why would anyone mix baking pies with slaying armies in the same sentence? And why him? Why a human? The girl finally stopped near a cracked stone fountain that no longer flowed with water. She turned and studied him with those strange golden eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. At last, Daniel broke the silence. His voice was sharp, but beneath it lay unease. "All right, enough games. Who are you? And what do you mean by offering me your mother as a mate?" The girl didn't blink. "I am Lyra. My mother is strong. Stronger than anyone in this city. But she is also alone. She needs a partner who will not run, who will not bow, who will stand even when the ground shakes." Daniel frowned. "You don't even know me." "I do." Lyra's voice carried a strange certainty. "I watched you in the marketplace. I watched you when you refused to be cheated. Most would walk away, but you stood your ground. That is what makes you human. That is what my mother needs." Daniel almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. He ran a hand over his tired face. "You're telling me your mother, whoever she is, wants a husband who argues over bread?" Lyra stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Not just bread. Over life, over honor, over everything that matters." Her words sent a chill crawling up his spine. She spoke as though she had seen more of him than he ever intended to show. Daniel shook his head, trying to push away the unease. Even if this is true, why would she want a human? Surely she has her own kind. Lyra's golden eyes darkened, and for the first time, he saw sadness in them. They fear her. They whisper, she is cursed. No warrior will stand by her side. No man of our kind will share her burden. They see her power, and they run. Daniel hesitated. Something inside him softened, just for a moment. He thought of his own past, of the times people had turned away from him because he didn't fit in. Because he wasn't from their world. Loneliness was something he knew well. But still, this was insane. He crossed his arms, forcing his voice steady. Look, Lyra, I'm not some storybook hero. I'm just a traveler. I don't belong here. Lyra leaned forward. You belong more than you think. Humans carry a kind of courage my people lost long ago. That is why I chose you. Daniel wanted to argue, to shout that this was madness. But before he could, a heavy sound echoed through the courtyard, footsteps, slow and deliberate. The ground seemed to tremble with each step. Lyra straightened. She comes. Daniel's pulse jumped. He turned toward the sound, every muscle tensing. Out of the shadows, a tall figure appeared. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Broad shoulders, strong arms marked with scars, and eyes like burning steel. Yet in her hands she carried a simple basket. And the smell of something sweet drifted toward him, warm pie, fresh and rich. Daniel's breath caught. This was her. This was the mother. She stopped a few paces away, her gaze locking onto him. The weight of it was like a blade pressing against his chest. So, she said, her voice deep and steady, This is the human my daughter speaks of. Daniel opened his mouth but found no words. The woman's presence was overwhelming, as though she carried both the warmth of fire and the cold of battle. She studied him for a long moment before setting down the basket on the stone fountain. The sweet scent of pie filled the air, but her eyes never softened. "Do you know why you are here?" she asked. Daniel swallowed. "Your daughter brought me," she said. He trailed off, unsure how to finish. "She said I should take you as my bride." The woman finished for him. Her tone carried no mockery, no laughter, only cold truth. Daniel's head spun. He wanted to deny it, to say this was all madness, but her gaze held him frozen. The woman took one slow step closer. "Tell me, human, do you have the strength to stand beside me? Not just in peace, but in war. Not just when the pie is sweet, but when the battlefield runs red." Daniel's throat went dry. He had no answer. Behind him, Lyra's golden eyes glimmered with quiet triumph. "This is why I brought him, Mother. He does not run." The woman's gaze pressed harder against him, waiting, testing. And in that moment, Daniel realized his confusion was only the beginning. He had stepped into something far larger than he understood, something that could change his life forever. The courtyard grew still, as if the entire city had paused to listen. The tall alien woman stood in front of Daniel, her figure half-shadowed by the fading light. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Her hair, dark as storm clouds, was tied back in a warrior's braid. Her arms were strong, scarred with battles fought long ago, yet her hands were steady as she held the basket of warm pies. This strange mixture of gentleness and danger in her presence made Daniel's heart pound harder. Her eyes, sharp and metallic, locked on him. She studied every part of him, the way he stood, the way he breathed, even the way his fingers twitched at his side. Daniel felt as though she could see through his skin, reading every thought he wanted to hide. At last, she spoke. Her voice was deep, firm, carrying the weight of command. "Human, do you understand what my daughter has done?" Daniel cleared his throat, his mouth dry. "She brought me here." She said, "You," he hesitated, unable to form the words. "She said I should take you as my mate." The woman's tone was flat, but her gaze never wavered. "Do you think this is a joke? Do you think my daughter plays with words?" Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am. I don't know what this is. I don't even know why she chose me." Lyra, standing close by, lifted her chin. "Because he is human. Because he did not run." The woman glanced at her daughter, then back at Daniel. Slowly, she stepped closer. Each movement was deliberate, heavy, as if the ground itself respected her weight. Daniel fought the urge to step back, to put distance between them, but something inside him refused to show fear. "You are smaller than the warriors I've fought beside," she said, her voice low but cutting, weaker in body, but perhaps stronger in spirit. She leaned in slightly, her piercing eyes inches from his. "Tell me, human, when the storm rises, will you stand, or will you hide?" Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to speak boldly, to answer with strength. But the truth pressed against his throat. He didn't know. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He was just a traveler. Before he could answer, the woman straightened and opened the basket. The smell of warm pie spread through the courtyard, soft and sweet, so different from her hard presence. She set the pie gently on the stone fountain, then reached behind her back. In one swift motion, she drew a blade longer than Daniel's arm. The metal gleamed faintly in the dim light, sharp enough to slice through stone. She held it easily, like it was no heavier than a spoon. Daniel froze. His body tensed, ready to run, but his mind screamed that moving would be a mistake. Lyra's voice broke the silence. "This is my mother, Solara. She once led 10,000. soldiers. She has slain beasts that tore through villages in a single night. She has walked through fire and returned without fear. Solara lowered the blade, pointing it at Daniel's chest. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that the air between them felt heavy. If you are to stand with me, you must not tremble when the blade is drawn. You must not bow when enemies rise. Can you do this? Daniel forced his breath to steady. He wanted to shout no, to say he was not part of this madness. But something in Solara's eyes burned like a challenge. If he backed down now, he knew she would dismiss him forever. I don't know, he admitted, his voice low but firm. But I won't run. A flicker passed through Solara's eyes, something almost like approval. She slowly lowered the sword, sliding it back into its sheath. Then, without warning, she took the pie from the fountain, broke off a piece, and held it out to him. Eat. Daniel stared at the offering, confused. A test? A trap? He hesitated, then reached out and took the piece. The crust was warm, the filling sweet and rich with spices he couldn't name. He chewed slowly, his mind racing. Solara watched him with a strange expression. Strength is not only measured in blood. Sometimes it is measured in patience, in kindness. In sharing food, she stepped back, folding her arms. Perhaps you have more than I thought. Lyra smiled faintly. I told you, Mother. But Daniel couldn't relax. The tension in the air still coiled tight, like a blade hidden beneath cloth. He had passed one test, but it was clear many more waited. Solara turned her gaze toward the darkening sky. The night comes, and with it, enemies who do not rest. If you truly wish to stand beside me, human, you will see their faces before dawn. Daniel's heart skipped. Enemies, before dawn. He swallowed hard, realizing the truth. This was no strange joke. No child's game. He had stepped into the life of a woman who baked pies with the same hands that once led armies. And she was about to drag him into her world of blood and fire. And somehow, he couldn't walk away. The night fell heavy over the courtyard. The last glow of the suns faded, and twin moons rose high above, silver lights spilling across the stone walls. Daniel sat on the fountain's edge, the taste of the alien pie still lingering in his mouth. Across from him, Solara, the warrior mother, sharpened her blade with slow, steady strokes. Sparks jumped from the stone each time the metal touched. Lyra, her daughter, crouched nearby, feeding dry sticks into a small fire until the flames crackled and cast shadows on their faces. The quiet pressed in, broken only by the scrape of steel and the pop of burning wood. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. His mind raced with questions, but his voice hesitated. Finally, he couldn't hold it anymore. Why me? He asked, his tone low. Why not one of your own kind? Solara didn't answer right away. Her hands moved with the rhythm of experience, sliding the blade against the stone. At last, she lifted her eyes. They glowed faintly in the firelight, hard as iron, but weighted with something deeper. Because my own kind abandoned me, she said flatly. Daniel frowned. Abandoned you? Lyra leaned forward, her golden eyes catching the flames. They feared her, she whispered. They still do. Solara shot her daughter a warning glance, but Lyra continued, her voice steady. They called her cursed. They said no warrior should fight beside her. But I know the truth. They envied her strength. They feared her power. And when the last war ended, they turned their backs on her. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at Solara, but her face was unreadable. Carved from stone, Solara finally spoke, her voice carrying both steel and sorrow. I led armies when others hid. I fought battles that no one dared face. My blade cut down creatures that tore through cities. My hands built walls that saved thousands. And yet, when the fighting ended, they whispered, I had taken too much blood with me. They said the gods would curse any man who stood at my side. Her words hung in the air like a weight too heavy to lift. Daniel felt a strange pull in his chest. He knew what it was like to be judged, to be pushed away for reasons he couldn't control. But this was greater, deeper, entire people turning away from their protector. Lyra's voice softened. She stayed strong. But strength is heavy when carried alone. That is why I found you. Daniel shook his head. But why me? I'm no soldier. I'm not a leader. I've never fought armies. Solara's eyes narrowed slightly. Because you are human. Because when pressed, your kind does not break. You bend, but you do not bow. You bleed, but you do not surrender. Daniel laughed bitterly. That's a nice story, but humans fall like anyone else. I've seen it. Perhaps, Solara said. But I've also seen humans face storms that would crush stronger races. I have seen your kind rise when no one expected it. And I have seen something else in you, Daniel. You stand when others walk away. Her words echoed through him. He remembered the marketplace, the bread merchant, the way Lyra had watched him. Such a small thing, yet somehow it had led him here, sitting by a fire with a warrior and her daughter. Being told he was different. Before he could speak again, Solara stood and turned toward the dark horizon. Her posture was sharp, her blade still glowing faintly from the fire. They will come tonight, she said quietly. Daniel stiffened. Who will come? Shadows, Solara answered. Old enemies. Men who once followed me, then betrayed me. They hunt me still, hoping to bury the last memory of my command. Lyra's face hardened. They come often, but never in the open. Tonight, they will strike again. And this time, you will see what it means to stand at my side. Daniel's stomach nodded. He wasn't ready for this. He had no weapon, no training, no plan. He wanted to tell them he wasn't the man they thought he was. But when Solara's eyes met his, he stayed silent. The fire crackled louder, sparks leaping into the night sky. Solara sat again, pulling another pie from the basket. She sliced it with the same blade she had sharpened moments ago, handing a piece to her daughter and then to Daniel. Daniel stared at the pie in his hands, confused. You're telling me enemies are coming tonight, and you're feeding me dessert? Solara smirked faintly, a ghost of humor breaking through her stern mask. A soldier fights better on a full stomach. Lyra laughed softly. And pie makes courage taste sweeter. Daniel shook his head, but a small, nervous smile tugged at his lips. Somehow, in this strange place, with danger pressing near, the warmth of food and fire made him feel like he belonged for the first time in years. Still, unease gnawed at him. The night was far from over, and shadows stirred in the distance. Solara's voice cut through the silence, low and final. If you are to be tested, human, the time is now. When the moon reaches its highest point, they will come. And then you must choose fight beside me or walk away forever. Daniel's heart pounded, heavy with fear and something else, anticipation. The secrets of the past had been revealed, but the future waited just beyond the flames, sharp and merciless. And the night was only beginning. The fire burned low, sending thin streams of smoke into the night sky. Daniel sat close to the flames, trying to calm his thoughts, but his chest felt heavy. Solara's words still echoed in his head. When the moon reaches its highest point, they will come. He had wanted answers, but now he had them, answers that promised danger, not peace. Solara stood suddenly, her shadow long and sharp across the courtyard. Her blade hung at her side, but her eyes locked on Daniel. Before the night tests you, I must test you first. Daniel stiffened. Test me? How? Lyra's face brightened with a mix of excitement and worry. Mother always tests those who stand with her. Solara moved to the edge of the firelight and picked up a wooden staff leaning against the wall. She tossed it to Daniel. The weight of the weapon surprised him. It was heavier than it looked. "You will fight me," Solara said simply. Daniel nearly dropped the staff. "Fight you? Are you insane? You'd crush me in seconds." Her expression didn't change. "If you are to stand beside me, you must show me you will not fall in the first storm. You may not defeat me, but you must face me." Daniel's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to refuse. But when he looked at Lyra, her golden eyes wide with expectation, and at Solara, who waited with calm certainty, he realized refusing would mean failure before the test even began. He gripped the staff with both hands and stood. "Fine," he said, forcing his voice steady. "But don't expect much." Solara picked up her own staff, spinning it in one hand with ease. She stepped into the center of the courtyard, her stance balanced, every movement controlled. She looked more like a statue of a warrior than a living woman. Daniel stepped forward awkwardly, holding the staff too tight. His palms were already sweating. "Breathe," Solara commanded. "Hold it as if it is part of you, not as if it will break." Daniel loosened his grip, though his heart hammered in his chest. "Now strike me," she said. Daniel hesitated. "What if I hurt you?" For the first time, Solara's lips curved into something close to a smile. "Try." He swung the staff clumsily. Solara blocked the blow with almost no effort, her staff barely moving as it absorbed the strike. She stepped forward and tapped him lightly on the shoulder. Quick as lightning. "If that had been real combat," she said, "you would already be dead." Daniel gritted his teeth and tried again. Swing, block, tap. Swing, block, strike. Again and again, she disarmed him, each time reminding him how unskilled he was. His arms ached, his breath grew ragged, but something inside him refused to quit. Lyra watched with shining eyes. "Don't stop, human. Keep going." Daniel adjusted his grip, steadied his breath, and attacked again. This time, when Solara blocked, he twisted the staff at the last second, forcing her to step back slightly. It was a small victory, but it lit a spark in him. Solara raised an eyebrow. "Better?" They continued. Daniel stumbled, fell, got back up, swung harder. Sweat dripped down his face. His arms felt like lead. But he kept moving, kept striking, kept standing. Finally, Solara swept his legs out from under him, and Daniel crashed to the ground. His staff clattered away. He lay on his back, chest heaving, staring up at the glowing moons. Solara stood over him, her staff pointed at his throat, but instead of striking, she lowered it and offered her hand. Daniel hesitated, then took it. She pulled him to his feet with surprising gentleness. "You are weak in skill," Solara said, "but you are strong in will. You do not quit, even when your body fails." That is what I needed to see. Daniel rubbed his sore arms, trying to catch his breath. "So what? I passed your test." Solara studied him for a long moment. "You survived it." Lyra laughed and clapped her hands. "That's more than most human." Daniel allowed himself a small, tired smile. He had not impressed her with strength or skill, but he had shown something else: stubbornness. And somehow, that seemed to matter to Solara. The fire crackled low, the shadows growing deeper around them. Solara turned her gaze to the horizon, where faint shapes moved in the distance. Her voice dropped, serious again. "The true test is coming. They are already on their way." Daniel's smile faded. His chest tightened again. The staff in his hands felt heavy, almost useless against real enemies. But when he looked at Solara's steel eyes and Lyra's hopeful face, he knew one thing: he could not run now. Solara's voice cut the silence like a blade. "Eat drink, breathe while you can. When the moon stands above us, you will see what it means to fight beside me." Daniel looked at the fire, at the pie crumbs still on the stone, at the shadows creeping closer. He had come so far in a single night, from a traveler who only wanted peace to a man standing on the edge of a war he never asked for. And he knew this was only the beginning. The moon rose higher, round and bright, hanging like a silver eye above the courtyard. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, sending thin lines of smoke into the night. Daniel sat on the fountain's edge, gripping the wooden staff Solara had given him. His arms still ached from her test, but the ache was nothing compared to the pounding in his chest. Solara stood like a statue, her sword drawn, her gaze fixed on the dark alleys beyond the courtyard. Lyra crouched close to the fire, her golden eyes reflecting the flames, her hands clenched tight. No one spoke. The silence grew thick, heavy, as though the whole city was holding its breath. Then it came. The sound of boots striking stone. Slow, heavy. Many of them, shadows shifted at the edge of the firelight. Figures appeared, cloaked in darkness, their weapons glinting under the moon. Solara's voice cut the air like steel. "They are here." Daniel's grip tightened on the staff. His throat felt dry. He counted the shapes 5, no, 7. Maybe more surrounding them like wolves. One of the men stepped forward, tall and broad, his face hidden by a black mask. His voice was low and cruel. "Solara, the cursed warrior. We warned you, your days were numbered." Solara didn't flinch. "And I warned you I would never bow." The man's laugh was cold. "You should have stayed in exile. But now you'll die in the dirt with your human pet." Daniel's blood ran cold. Pet, that word cut deep. His jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Solara lifted her sword, the firelight dancing along its edge. "If you came for a fight, you will have one." The masked man raised his arm, and the others surged forward. The courtyard exploded into chaos. Steel clashed with steel. Sparks flew. Solara moved like a storm unleashed. Her blade cut through the first enemy in a blur, then spun to block another strike. Her movements were sharp, powerful, yet graceful, as though she had fought this battle 1,000 times before. Daniel's heart thundered as one of the attackers rushed toward him. Instinct screamed at him to run, but he forced his feet to stay planted. He lifted the staff just in time, blocking a slash that would have torn across his chest. The blow rattled his bones, but he pushed back with all the strength he had. The enemy snarled and swung again. Daniel ducked clumsily, the blade whistling above his head. He jabbed forward with the staff, striking the man's ribs. It wasn't enough to fell him, but it made him stumble. For the first time in his life, Daniel realized he could stand in a fight. Not win, perhaps, but stand. Lyra darted behind Daniel, throwing a stone that struck another attacker's helmet. "Don't stop," she shouted. "Keep fighting." Daniel swung again, his arms burning, his breath coming hard. The staff cracked against the man's wrist, knocking the blade loose. Daniel's eyes widened. He had actually disarmed him, but there was no time to celebrate. Another attacker charged, blade raised high. Daniel braced himself, certain this would be the end. Solara appeared in a blur, her sword cutting the attacker down before he could reach Daniel. She didn't look at him, didn't speak, but her presence was enough to steady his shaking legs. The battle raged on. Solara fought like 10 soldiers at once, her blades singing through the air. Every strike was precise, every movement deadly. The attackers fell one by one, but more pressed forward, snarling and cursing. Daniel fought clumsily, but with stubborn fire. He blocked, ducked, swung, even when his body screamed for rest. Each time he thought he would fall, he remembered Solara's words, "You must not tremble." You must not bow, at last. Only the masked leader remained, standing tall among the bodies of his fallen men. His eyes glowed with hate as he looked at Solara. You will never escape your curse, and this human will die beside you. Solara stepped forward, her blade shining in the moonlight. No curse binds me, and no man decides the fate of the human but himself. With a roar, the leader lunged. Solara met him head-on. The clash was thunderous, sparks flying as their blades locked. They pushed against each other, strength against strength, until Solara twisted her wrist and drove her sword through his chest. The masked man gasped, then fell to the ground, his weapon clattering beside him. Silence followed, heavy and final. Daniel stood panting, his staff trembling in his hands. His arm shook, his body ached, but he was alive. Lyra rushed to his side, her face glowing with triumph. You didn't run. You fought, human. You stood with us. Solara wiped her blade clean and looked at Daniel. For the first time, her hard eyes softened, just slightly. You faced death, and you did not bow. You are stronger than I believed. Daniel swallowed hard, his chest still heaving. He didn't feel strong. He felt broken, exhausted, barely standing. But Solara's words lit a fire inside him, a strange pride he had never felt before. The moon shone down on the quiet courtyard, bodies scattered across the stones. The battle was over, but Daniel knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of something greater, something that would bind him too. Solara and her daughter in ways he still didn't understand, and as Solara sheathed her sword, her voice broke the silence once more. You have proven yourself tonight, human, but the true choice still lies ahead. Daniel's breath caught. The battle was done. But a greater test was yet to come. The courtyard was silent except for the crackle of the dying fire and the faint whistle of the night wind. Bodies of the fallen enemies lay scattered across the stone floor, their weapons glinting cold under the twin moons. The scent of smoke and blood hung heavy in the air. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, gripping the staff so tightly his knuckles ached. His body shook from exhaustion, but he was still on his feet. Solara wiped her blade clean on the cloak of a fallen soldier. Her movements were calm, deliberate, as though battles like this were nothing new. When she sheathed her sword, the sound echoed sharp and final, like the closing of a door. Lyra hurried to her mother's side, her golden eyes shining with pride. You see, Mother, she said breathlessly. He stood with us. He did not run. He fought until the end. Solara's gaze turned to Daniel. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her eyes, cold as steel, studied him, measuring him, weighing his worth. Daniel's chest tightened under her stare. He felt like she could see not only his bruises and sweat, but the very core of who he was. Finally, she stepped forward. Her boots crunched on broken stone as she stopped only a few paces away. You surprised me, human, she said. Her voice was steady, yet there was something softer beneath. It's something rare. You are no trained soldier. You lack skill. You lack speed. But you did not bow. You faced death and still stood. That is strength no blade can measure. Daniel swallowed, unsure how to respond. His throat was dry, his words caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. He had expected to die tonight. Instead, he was being praised by a warrior who had led armies. Lyra smiled, her voice bright. I told you, Mother. I told you he was the one. Solara's eyes lingered on Daniel. Then she reached into the basket that still sat by the fountain, miraculously untouched by the chaos. She lifted the last remaining pie, its crust cracked but still whole. She held it in her scarred hands and spoke words that struck Daniel harder than any blade. Daniel, human, will you take this pie and with it, take me as your bride? The courtyard fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Daniel's breath caught. He stared at her, stunned, his mind spinning. He wanted to laugh, to ask if she was joking, but the fire in her eyes told him she was not. This was no trick, no test. This was real. His heart pounded. He thought of the path that had led him here, the marketplace, the strange question from Lyra, the firelight, the battle. He thought of Solara's strength, her scars, her loneliness. He thought of Lyra's faith in him, and he thought of himself how he had drifted for so long, searching for a place where he belonged. For years he had walked from world to world, never staying, never rooted. But tonight, for the first time, he had stood and fought for something greater than himself. His voice shook when he spoke. Why me? Why would you want me, of all people? Solara's eyes softened, just barely. Because you are human. Because you see not only my blade, but also my hands. Because you fought without promise of reward. And because you remind me that strength is not only in war, but in the courage to stand, even when standing hurts. Lyra leaned forward, her voice eager. Say yes, Daniel. Don't you see? You were meant for this. Daniel looked at the pie in her hands. Simple, ordinary food, but now it carried the weight of destiny. He thought of his loneliness, of hers, and of the strange bond forged in fire and blood. Slowly, he reached out and took the pie from her hands. Yes, he whispered, his voice steady now. I'll stand with you. Lyra clapped her hands, laughing with joy. I knew it. I knew it. Solara nodded once, her expression still stern, but her eyes brighter than before. Then, it is done. From this night forward, you are not alone. And neither am I. Daniel felt a strange warmth spread through him, stronger than the fire, stronger than the battle. For the first time in his life, he belonged. But even as relief washed over him, Solara's voice turned grave again. Remember, Daniel? To stand with me is to face not only my hearth, but also my enemies. You will eat pies with me, yes. But you will also march into wars. Are you ready for that? Daniel looked into her eyes, unflinching. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. But I know I won't run. For the first time, Solara's lips curved into a true smile. A warrior's smile. A bride's smile. The fire crackled, the moonlight bathed the courtyard. And Daniel realized his life had changed forever. He had not just found a mate, he had found a family, and a fight worth standing for. And the galaxy, he knew, would never be the same again.